Welcome to another conversation in People in Fundraising. This podcast features interviews with nonprofit professionals who discuss their career journeys, lessons learned, and enthusiasm for working in fundraising. And here's your host, the founder of People in Fundraising, Tim Wilson.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode in Season 4 of the People in Fundraising podcast. It's Monday, May 6th, 2024. It's 8:30 a.m. in snowy Utah, and I'm so excited to welcome our guest today, Nida Januskis, who is joining us from Paris. Good afternoon, Nida.
Hi, afternoon, Tim. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I worked with you on 2 occasions at Harvard Business School, and you're one of my favorite colleagues, and I'm just so grateful and so excited to have you on the program today. You've had such a rich history, and I'm excited to have you talk with our guests, our audience today as a guest about this. And it's been well worth it to make this happen. So thank you for your time today.
So happy to be here.
Yeah. And tell us, before we get into the questions, Nida, by title, by employer, what you're doing right now, please.
Sure. So I'm the Associate Dean of Advancement at INSEAD, which is the best business school in the world. Okay. And I can say that because, Tim, you and I both worked at Harvard Business School. So we have a good comparison. And it's a school that is actually one of the largest ranked, it is the largest ranked business school with graduating 1,000 students per year.
Wow.
A very interesting model with campuses in Fontainebleau, in Singapore, in Abu Dhabi, and also an innovation kind of hub in San Francisco.
Oh, wow.
And then sort of my role is all about how do we engage and fundraise with our 70,000 strong global alumni network who are in 170 countries. It's pretty intimidating, but it's a lot of fun, and that's what I do.
Awesome. I imagine when we may get into this in the questions itself, I imagine there's travel for you to those campuses and such as well. So.
Oh, definitely. It is definitely a global role,
Yeah.
which, has its definitely, bonus points at times. So it's fun to get around, but it also can be quite tiring, right? With all the jet lag, et cetera. But it's for a worthy cause. We'll get into that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's dive in to that first question. I'm just so eager to hear how you enter the fundraising profession, please, Nida.
I'm sure everyone on your, podcast has said, like, you don't really get into fundraising thinking you're going to get into that sort of role, right? So I think for me, I had graduated with a finance degree and was working for a commercial real estate company in Boston. And this was actually a year after getting married and traveling the world backpacking with my husband, right?
Oh, wow.
So already sort of being a Lithuanian-American, growing up in Chicago, getting married, then, backpacking around for a year, seeing the globe, then moved to Boston, worked for this commercial real estate company in asset management, and then started fundraising and realizing I was unlocking something there, but I don't feel like my passion or my values were really aligned in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And then serendipitously, I ran into a woman who was a Harvard Business School alumna who also ran the HBS fund.
Oh.
And that was our colleague Jill, if you remember, Tim.
Yes.
And she, we were sitting at the same table and we were talking. And essentially, I went and interviewed for then a role that was around fundraising with not just young alumni, but international alumni. And that was super interesting because of my background. And that's how I sort of got my foot in the door with Harvard Business School. Worked there in Boston for 5 years. Then actually my husband was transferred to Paris. And so I took a bit of a sabbatical from HBS, was home with my children, which I always worked. I had 2 kids at the time. moved to Paris, but really wanted to acclimate, learn French. So I, quit HBS, went headstrong into living in Paris and did that for 4 years, had my third. And then I was like, okay, I got to go back.
Yeah.
I'm ready to go back to work. And so called up HBS and said, hey, you're in this second capital campaign. I worked on the first one. Would you consider hiring me back to run the European fundraising? And they did.
Yeah.
And so then I did my, 2.0 life with HBS, which I'm so grateful for, out of Paris. And then it was then that INSEAD kind of came knocking and was looking for, and I was on the major gifts team at that point. I was looking for an executive director of development, and it's a step up for me. And I'd heard about the school in the forest of Fontainebleau, and I have friends who had graduated. And so I thought, why not? Let's do this.
Yeah.
And within a year of that, my predecessor, my boss at the time, the associate dean, she left to go back to Canada. And she was the one who really encouraged me to go for the role, go for the associate dean. I did. And I ended up getting the role very quickly after coming back from being a trailing spouse, going back to HBS, then INSEAD, and having this really incredible trajectory that I'm really thankful to INSEAD for giving me that chance, to run a team. And it's such an interesting institution like INSEAD. So here I am.
Here you are. And that's about 10 years ago when you first joined?
Yeah, 8 years. I've been at INSEAD now for 8 years.
Okay.
So, yeah. And through that, we had a big capital campaign called A Force for Good, grew the team to now where we're 65 employees on 3 campuses. So really a global team. We were on Zoom before Zoom was a thing,
That's awesome. So cool. I still remember the first day you came back for HBS 2.0, and I met you in this little conference room, and you and I collaborated quite a bit on international, for me, prospect research, helping you with lead generation on the ground in Europe. And I remember your last day at HBS, and just like, man, this is, I really just enjoyed working with you, and to see that there is life after, your first fundraising employer, life after Harvard Business School. I think some people are like, man, how could I, where could I go institution-wise that can, go beyond that? I think you can obviously move up in title, and you have as well. But now to go to the world's leading business school with that role is amazing.
And I think it's also about finding kind of your tribe, right? In a sense that INSEAD, I think I had the trajectory I had at INSEAD because it was INSEAD, because they do really appreciate and encourage diversity, right? So when you think about a classroom, no more than 10% of the students come from one country. Right. So you just have so many nationalities that come together. This is represented in the staff. Like, I am a Lithuanian-American living in Paris. That's not that interesting. Like, that is like a normal sort of background.
Wow. Yeah.
At INSEAD, faculty, the same, the kind of diversity that we bring. And so I think that, it from my background really attracted me to the role, and also allowed me to be successful in a way that I think was very different than HBS. But HBS gave me sort of that excellence, right? That experience that I could bring. You obviously put a different lens on of INSEAD, but there were quite a bit of similarities. So it was a fun transition.
Yeah, so cool. And you mentioned, I just want to follow up. You mentioned you moved to Paris and learning French. Are you trilingual? I mean, I know you speak Lithuanian fluently, and other languages too, French in that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I am very dinner conversational. I think the problem I have at INSEAD, everything is in English, right? So I work in English.
Okay.
And so there is a 3-language requirement at INSEAD actually when you apply, but all the classes are held in English. Okay, but back in the day when INSEAD was founded over 60 years ago, classes were held in English, in French, or in German, right? And so there is a multilingual component to this, but I would just say that, so yes, my French is pretty good, but it's probably not where 100% fluency where I'd like it to be. But on
Yeah.
the other hand, my kids, I would say, are 100% fluent,
Wow.
very, very bilingual, trilingual, and are adding kind of languages as they go. It's quite special.
That's so cool. So cool. Man. Well, continuing that theme, as you just talked about, Nida, with diversity, the diversity in the student body and among the staff. And this is a Harvard Business Review article, so we're still talking in some form with Harvard Business School. When I came across this quote, I immediately thought of you as I was putting together my questionnaire for the master questionnaire for all my guests. And I would just love to get your thoughts on it. Is a 2018 study that says, quote, social science studies show that international experiences can enhance creativity, reduce intergroup bias, and promote career success, and that people's exposure to novel cultural values and norms prompt people to repeatedly engage with their own values and beliefs and to really challenge them and see what they can discard and what do they hold true to in terms of their values as they're exposed to such a diverse international experience. So as you talked about, Lithuanian-American, you've lived in France now for 8 years, you travel for work. How does that synopsis of these studies about international experience resonate with your lived experience?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I mean, obviously, having that diversity of both language and also experience and is interesting in my work and with our alumni who are curious. Lithuania is a small country of 3 million. Some of them have been, some of them have not. So it does add sort of it's a conversation starter. But I think in general, what INSEAD has produced are these alumni who have been in the classroom with so many different nationalities, who are now in so many countries, 170, right, countries
Yeah.
around the world. We're not all in New York. We're not all in Boston. We're not all in London. We are literally like all over the place.
Yes.
And so you need to be able to relate as an advancement professional with all of these different alumni and their views and kind of manage that diversity, right? So having some of that lived experience, but also just working at a place like INSEAD gives you more credibility, right? And you're exposed to that more. And you see that even in the creativity that's brought from like the staff here and how we think and why I think INSEAD kind of punches above its weight because, we're considered a top 2-3 business school in the world, according to Financial Times, but we don't have the same endowments, the same resources. So we kind of punch above our weight. And a lot of it is because we're super entrepreneurial. We try, and if we fail, that's okay. We open up another door. We learn fast. We keep moving. And that allows us to be agile and nimble. And I think that diversity adds to that creativity, that entrepreneurship, the entrepreneurial spirit, and is really important in what we do here at INSEAD, but I think also helps us here in advancement be able to work with so many different nationalities globally. So you kind of just got to be international to even if you are like American and you want to come here, it's you work here because you've traveled a lot. You want to be exposed to on a global scale.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you were talking, Nida, I was imagining or recalling a couple of posts on LinkedIn that you have put up over the last year or so. And forgive me if this quick pivot may cover some answers you're already preparing for other questions. But so for one, your posts about the INSEAD reunions come to mind. In just around the world, I don't remember all the locations, but I think you were in India recently for an event.
Our alumni forum. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then I think a few months ago you also posted about an alumni app for INSEAD that like it was quite a bit of extensive teamwork to make it go live. And so anything about those specific touch points to engage with the broad alumni base?
Well, I mean, it goes back to, the mission of advancement, right? We want to, enable INSEAD to do what it is meant to do, and that is really to develop and transform leaders around business and society.
Yeah.
And I think, again, it's a blessing and a curse to have 70,000 alumni in 170 countries, because you're like, how the heck do you go around and make sure that you're, visiting with them, engaging with them meaningfully with them? So part of it is obviously, you're bringing people back for their reunions, right? That's been something that we've really invested a lot of time, energy, and it is like so much fun. We have a chateau in our backyard, the Chateau of Fontainebleau. Like no business school has that, right? So we have these intense summer balls. They're so much fun. And then we go around and we have these alumni forums yearly in different countries. So this year it was in India. Next year it will be in Amsterdam. The year before it was in London. The year before that it was New York. So, we have to really be global, right? From that perspective. But then you're still missing people, right? So you can you can have the events here on campus. You can take some events to, but they're still it's a small percentage, right? Who attends from our alumni community, if you look at the big picture. So a big piece of that has been like, how do we engage with our alumni through lifelong learning?
Yeah.
Which is a big part of what, obviously, through COVID, we really accelerated in terms of our webinars, our online and in-person pop-up program for alumni, really trying to make sure that they're just not connecting with one another, their classmates, and not just with INSEAD during your reunion, but what happens in between, right? And how do we make sure that INSEAD stays relevant for you and what you're doing? So we've really put a lot of energy into our lifelong learning programming. And now what's really amazing is that we've also on the digital side, this has been something that we've really pushed forward in the last few years. And one of the big innovations was actually creating a My INSEAD app. So we have an app for our alumni, right?
Awesome.
We can go in and do the typical things like, I want to search for, my classmate, or I can't remember this person's name. I'll try to find them. So the alumni directory, you can manage your alumni association. We have 60 national alumni associations and global clubs. So you can manage that. You can look at events. What are all the events happening globally through these alumni associations? Because I think part of the strength of INSEAD is the decentralized nature of our alumni who are everywhere, who are like insane numbers of volunteers who want to help the school.
Yeah.
And so we really leverage that. And so, but you need awareness. If somebody's traveling to Singapore, or they're traveling to LA, or they're traveling to Lithuania, can they look on the app and see if there's an event and register? They can now, right?
Yeah.
And there's a really cool feature where it's like, you can actually say like, oh, I'm today I'm in London. I'm going to click on find INSEADers nearby me, and it will show all the INSEADers who are nearby, and you can connect with them to meet for coffee. It's pretty cool.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
So great. Well, thank you for on the spot question and answer. That's really good to hear about. So in addition to your full-time role at INSEAD, I know that you're involved in various other nonprofits as a volunteer. And if you could just talk a little bit about two in particular, the European Network for Women in Leadership and Refugee, and how you got involved with those. I hope I pronounced that second one correctly. What do you do there?
I mean, I think in general, like my involvement with these organizations, both around women and empowerment, these are just super rooted to me in education and through my values. So I'm very happy to give my time and energy and philanthropy to organizations such as this one. So very much aligned with that, I think, first and foremost. The European Women in Leadership, kind of like called WIL, is a great network because it's an INSEAD. The reason I'm on the board of that is because actually INSEAD is an academic partner to them.
Oh.
So this is all around bringing a network for women in Europe who are at a certain point in their career. But what they also do is they have something called the Women Talent Pool. And this is really about bringing that next generation of women upwards and giving them a network, and also giving them some of the lifelong learning programs, and INSEAD is a part of that.
Oh.
So part of that is also like mentoring from the board members to different women. That's something in general I try to do as much as possible,
Yeah.
informally and formally. So that's on sort of the European Women Network side, what's called WIL. And then I'm a board member for Refugee, which is really about addressing, one of the biggest challenges, I think, globally, and that's really the refugee crisis. And what you see, especially this particular organization is based in Kenya, what you see is they're working with women and girls and their children who are displaced. And they have like this great holistic approach where they're really bringing in like mental health, wellness, things like yoga even, but also most importantly, skills training. And depending on a woman or a girl's level, it might be something as, computer training or, tie-dyeing scarves so that they can actually sell it at the market and be, independent and sustainable. So this is really something I'm passionate about and feel very driven to continue working with them. So but it really has to do with education, women, and empowerment. Those are kind of my biggest drivers now.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing those examples of how you're involved. And before we started recording, Nida, you had mentioned just the importance of finding time outside of family and career obligations for ways to express, your values, your beliefs, the ability to give back and help others as well. So thank you for sharing those. We've got two more questions here, and I'm really I'm excited to hear these responses. So one is, what challenges have you overcome to get where you are today? This almost 10 years at INSEAD and just the career you've had, please.
Yeah. So I think for me, the challenge, I think when I, became the associate dean, I was just really took a hard look at myself and was like, I need help on the digital and technological, on the tech side. This was not my strength, right? I think more, on the relationship management side, right? The fundraising side. But now all of a sudden, you've got this network of 70,000. How do you engage with them? What are the tools? What's our CRM? All of that was very foreign. And so, one of my sort of informal pillars was like, how do I become a digital badass, right? Like that was what I set a goal for myself. And I was very lucky because I reported to the Dean of Innovation at INSEAD,
Oh,
who pretty
interesting.
much, not just led by example, because this is what, he was all into, but also allowed me the time and the energy and to explore, to learn, to fall fast, pick myself up, try again, and brought my level up. So I think when I look at things at what we've done at INSEAD, I find it very very impressive, especially on the things like what I mentioned already, the My INSEAD app, things that we're doing but also because we have to, Tim. Our alumni do live all over the world. They're not in a small radius of where the campus is. So it's kind of like, I don't have a choice. And I think that pushes me and us to do more than I think probably other schools. And so we're now integrating AI much more into what we're doing. And I'm encouraging my team to think about how do we use AI, data analytics. That's one of our pillars, actually. How do we, become more data centered to make better decisions next year? So this is really a place that I was not at when I came to INSEAD, but seeing where I've grown has been really fun for me. And I didn't know I liked digital transformation this much.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, obviously, you had to, level up your game with digital. In terms of, making the time for it and maybe overcoming any anxieties or any particular sticking points, anything come to mind about
Well,
becoming a
yeah,
digital badass?
to me, it's like surrounding yourself with the right people. right?
Yeah.
Like know what you're not good at.
Yeah.
And so you can bring people in who support that, who like,
Mhm.
okay, I know where I want to go. I don't exactly know how to get there,
Yeah.
but someone else, and I think I was really lucky to have the foresight to sort of hire or encourage people who helped me, who are better, who are smarter at these things.
Yeah.
And that's what you want to have, some of that self-realization of like, this is important. You don't exactly know. And then I think it's also just making the time. Is you have to get in there. Like it's
Yeah.
great to know the front end, but you have to understand the back end of things. If you want to get into the digital transformation, you got to sit in those steer codes. You got to sit with the project managers. You got to sit with the IT people and understand the systems,
Yeah.
and ask stupid questions, right?
Right.
But in the end, it's worth it.
Yeah.
And then you can advocate better for resources as well once you understand it. So I think it's both surrounding yourself with the right people and taking the time.
Sure. And I would say also, like you mentioned it a little bit here, like asking stupid questions and knowing what you're not good at. It's like there's a level of self-awareness and vulnerability to say, hey, I don't know this. I don't,
Right.
this is not my forte. So
Yeah. I
great.
also think one other thing is like you kind of have to put it out publicly that you're doing this. So
Mm,
like we had a big pillar that was like build the machine, like we're building the machine behind all of this. Like we're in this big campaign. And then, everybody knew this was up. This is a big priority for us. So it's kind
yeah.
of like you're planting that flag.
Yeah.
And so it kind of helps keep you honest, keeps you accountable if you put it there, if you're measuring it, if you're keeping yourself accountable and it's being public.
Yeah. I love that. Great answer. You just mentioned self-realization. I think that ties into our last question here, Nida, which is um, about, just reflecting on your younger self as a career professional. So you're someone that you've been very generous at offering advice and mentorship to others. You've talked about it today with Will. I've personally benefited from your help and mentorship, and I really appreciate the time you've given me in my career. Um, just to be candid, you helped me write a persuasive argument to get my current job at Weber State University. And we're really like, you've got to advocate for yourself, which was kind
Yeah.
of, that was like a vulnerability of my own. So you are a key reason why I am at where I'm at today. So thank you.
Oh,
Um,
that's sweet. I'm happy to hear that.
yeah, it's all true. So reflecting inward and that self-realization you just talked about, what advice might you have for your younger self as you entered either the workforce in general or development in particular that you think could be helpful for the rising generation of people in development?
Yeah, I mean, I think, thinking about the example with you, and I remember this very clearly, it's a bit, if you don't ask, you don't get,
Yeah.
right? So it is up to you. They can say no. It's okay,
Yeah.
but I think we limit ourselves, right? And I remember very clearly, this moment where I, was invited to go onto this like, this TV show. I mean, this sort of news show, right? To talk about, it was INSEAD was celebrating 50 years of women. And I
Oh,
had done quite a bit around sort of some events that were coming up. And so it's called France 24. So it's kind of like the CNN, right, of
wow.
France and globally.
Wow.
And so they invited me, which I was already like, why are they inviting me? To come and speak for 10 minutes on issues and the importance of women in especially business schools, et cetera.
Yeah.
And I was so nervous. I was so nervous. And I was like, I can't do this. And I'm pacing. And, the TV anchor saw this and she came over to me, and grabbed my shoulders and looked me right in the eye. And it was like, you've got this. Don't get
Mm.
in the way of yourself.
Oh, wow.
And she's like, you belong here.
Oh, man.
And I was like, okay. And I just needed that, like I needed that
Yeah.
moment. And so I think sometimes like we have to conquer our own self-doubt, right? And sometimes you just gotta like a little bit fake it till you make it, but you just gotta do it. You get more comfortable the more you do something, right? But
Yeah.
don't let yourself get in that way. So that's sort of the biggest thing. I think it took me a while to find that rhythm, and and I have to remind myself that even, today or other times, like it doesn't really go away, some of that.
Yeah. Wow. That's a goosebump moment. Like just picturing this anchor, telling you, right in your eyes, you belong here. You got this.
Yeah.
I love that.
So I think for others, sometimes you got to tell other people that as well.
Yeah.
Right. And going back to that mentorship part, don't be afraid, to encourage, very directly to somebody who may just need that to get that extra courage.
Yes, absolutely. Wow, Nida, this has been such a great interview, and I want to be mindful of your time. If you want to tell us quickly where you're going next after this interview concludes, I think it's so really cool.
Oh, yeah. Just after this, I'm actually going to my band practice. I'm part of the INSEAD band, which is made up of faculty, staff, and it's quite amazing and fun, and they're actually really good. So I'm happy to be a part of it. And we have something that we're performing coming up. So I'm gonna bring my bass and head over to band practice.
That is so cool.
We have to do stuff. I mean, this is part of work, but I think, I just encourage people to make sure they find something that they do that's outside of, for me, it's music, right? So outside of home life, outside of work life, where you can really feed yourself. That might be a piece of advice, to just make that time.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's well said. Yeah, I've fallen victim to not doing that, and you don't get that time back. So,
No.
yeah. Well, Nida, this has been just such a delight to reconnect with you and to have you as a guest. It's been such a goal of mine. So thank you for the generosity and the enthusiasm you've brought to our
I'm so
conversation.
happy, Tim. And I just have always enjoyed working with you, and so happy to still be in touch with you.
Likewise. Yes.
Okay.
I hope our paths cross in person again someday
I hope
soon.
so too.
Well, for our audience, you can find Nida's conversation. It'll be airing in July of 2024. And thank you for supporting this podcast when it airs on LinkedIn and YouTube. And until next time, have a great rest of your day. Thank you, Nida.
Bye. Thanks, Tim.
Bye-bye.